Hi, and welcome to Scale Model Basics. I'm Aaron Skinner, and this time we're going to be taking a look at washes. What is a wash? Well, contrary to the term, it's not about making your model cleaner. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. You're going to make it a little bit dirty. Washes are basically thin paint, or very, very thin paint that flows into and around detail and panel lines and really brings that detail into sharp relief. It's kind of what brings your model out of its shell. So what are the different kinds of washes? Well, you can make them from just about any kind of paint, enamels, acrylics, and even artist oils. The one thing you can't make it out of is lacquers, because one, they dry too quickly, and two, they're the most likely to eat into the paint underneath. When you're considering what to use as a wash, you want to remember what you painted the model with. If you have painted your model with enamels, using an enamel wash, and particularly since it's basically mostly thinner, that thinner is going to eat into that paint and destroy your really well applied paint job. We don't want that. So remember, if you're using acrylics, you can use enamels or oils over the top. If you have painted with enamels, probably better to go with acrylics. So you can buy pre-mixed washes, both in acrylics and enamels. Now, these have some great advantages. I use the Tamiya enamel stuff all the time. They're convenient, they're easy to use, you don't have to really think about it, you just shake it up and apply it to your model. The advantage of mixing your own, which you can do with enamels, acrylics, or even artist oils, is that you get to control the color, so you can tailor it to the model that you're putting it onto, or you can control the density, so you can make it a little thicker for certain applications or a little thinner if you really want it to spread a ways. The other advantage that mixing your own has is it's considerably cheaper. A tube of oil paint like this, it'll cost you $8 or $9. This will last you a lot of models. So let's see how we mix our own. So when it comes to choosing a color for your wash, your first inclination might be to go with black, because that's going to make good deep shadows. The problem is it's actually a little too stark and appears a bit unrealistic, so I suggest going with a dark brown like this burnt umber. To mix a wash from artist oils, I just need to take just a little bit of color. You don't need much. And then some thinner. In this case, I'm using terpenoid, which is an odorless turpentine substitute, or artificial turpentine. And I'm just going to pour quite a bit into this little jar. Again, you want like a 20-to-1 ratio of thinner to color here. And then just start mixing. And you can see that it is definitely looking like tinted thinner. And you want to make sure you get this as mixed up as you can. This is the area where pre-mixed has its advantages. So once you're satisfied that it is mixed up, you can check the density by touching the stir stick to the side, and you can see that you get just a little film of color moving down the side, and that's about right. Like I said, it's more like dirty thinner than thin paint. There are two basic ways to apply washes. There's an overall wash and there's a pin wash. Let's start with the overall wash. When applying a wash, it's always a good idea to turn the surface that you're applying it to as horizontal as possible. That way, the thin wash will flow across the surface rather than running down it. You'll also notice that this whippet that I'm applying the wash to is particularly shiny. I applied clear gloss to it. Washes flow better on gloss paints. On flat paints, they have a tendency to bleed into the color and become very hard to remove the excess. So to apply the wash, I take a flat brush, dip it into the color, take off a little of the excess, and then I just drag it across the surface. And you can see that that color is flowing and gathering around the raised detail and into the panel lines. And you just keep going like that. The overall wash, as you can see, is also going to lightly tint the surface around it, similar to a filter. This is why this wash is good as a blending technique for other colors. And you just keep going like that. It's very simple. So that's an overall wash. You can see that it is gathering particularly around these raised sections at the bottom of the suspension units and around other detail, and just darkening all of that just a little bit and bringing it into relief. What you can do if you're not satisfied with one layer is you can always add more as it dries. This wash is still pretty fresh. As you can see, it's quite dark. It will lighten some as it dries, but you can really see the difference from the side that it's on versus the other side, which has not had a wash applied yet. For the pin wash, I'm going to use Tamiya Panel Line Accent Color Brown, which is their fancy way of saying wash. This is an enamel. There's nothing wrong with the oil wash that I mixed. I just want to show you how a premix works. So the difference between a pin wash and an overall wash is how targeted it is. Pin wash is short for pinpoint wash. So the idea is that you use a fine brush. The nice thing about the Tamiya stuff is it comes with one, and you're going to apply it directly to the details that you want to emphasize. And you can see that as I touch this brush to the edges of the detail, it just flows around it naturally. And don't be too worried if you go a little outside the lines, because whoops, there are ways to correct that, which we'll get to. But just keep going around all of your detail. Each of these rivets is great to highlight. And all you really need to do is touch the brush to it, and it will just flow around it. As you can see, the wash is a little out of the lines in some places. You've got some big blobs, but this is easy to correct. I'm going to take some clean enamel thinner, and it is very easy to just reactivate the thinner, or the wash, and you can just brush it away or manipulate it back up around detail. When you do this between applications on the model, you want to blot the brush off on a paper towel, because you don't want to be transferring more of the paint you are trying to get rid of back to the model. And you can just keep going around and until you are 100% happy with the way it looks. So you can also use a Q-tip for this, particularly for larger areas. Same thing, just apply it, and then you can remove it, blot it out, take it a little more thinner, and just keep going. This is particularly useful for horizontal surfaces where you want to blend it back into the surface. On surfaces that slope, you can drag down so that any extra wash begins to look like streaking. That's how you can apply washes to your models. It's a great technique for starting the weathering process, and for me, it's the moment when a painted model starts to really look like a three-dimensional object. Thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Skinner. We'll see you next time.
Good job, Aaron. And remember, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have some suggestions about washes that you'd like to share, put them in the comments below. Thanks a lot.